Stacy Gallagher. I'm with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm based in Newport, and I'm a part of the Marine Reserves program. Specifically, my position is Community Engagement Coordinator, but that doesn't matter really. I'm just talking to people about the Marine Reserves. So, specifically, I wanted to chat with you guys a little bit about some of the basic information about what the heck is a Marine Reserve, and then wanted to focus in on Cape Perpetua here, your guys' home reserve, and really look at, where the boundaries, what you can and can't do, and what things to look at. And at the end, I want to touch a little bit on some of the science and some of the things that we're studying and what we hope to learn. So hopefully we'll have more information to give out to you guys in the future about what is actually in this Marine Reserve, and have some cool video that we'll show after we answer some questions. So, I'm going to start off with one really quick little video, which is not there, but it's here.
Along the Oregon coast, waves dramatically break and crash over craggy headlands. While beneath the surface, there exists a mysterious and fascinating world, mostly unseen, home to thousands of species of sea life. And when the tides are low, the bottom of the ocean is right beneath your feet. The rocky intertidal zone and its tide pools give you a glimpse into the wonders of the sea. Oregonians have a long tradition of protecting outstanding areas, from state parks to public beaches, and have now extended this tradition to the sea. Tide pools, rocky reefs, marine reserves. It's all connected.
Alright, so that's just a brief snippet to show you what it is we're talking about, and really the interface that we have with marine reserves is that rocky intertidal, and it's really critical habitat. The other reason I wanted to show you guys that video is this is a resource that you guys can use and play at other venues. So it is located on our website, which is right here, the OregonOcean.info website, and this is in that gallery tab up here at the top. It's also on the state parks website, the tidepools.org website, and that has a lot of really great information specifically about tide pool critters and organisms. So moving along. So as the video said, we have a strong history of protecting these special areas, and specifically in Cape Perpetua, we have some areas that have been protected for a long time, not just the new marine reserves. So some of these areas have been established since the 1960s, and a lot of them were designated by community groups and also recommended from the Rocky Shore Strategy. So big study inventory was done in the 1990s, looking at all that important rocky habitat and looking for places that were really special, that really needed some special protections on it. So we have varying levels of protection for some of these areas, and really this is trying to answer the question, what the heck is a marine reserve anyways? So collectively, you might hear some buzzwords about MPAs, or marine protected areas. So marine protected area is basically just an area that is protected, has some sort of protections on it. Here in Oregon, we have certain fishing activities that are not allowed and some that are allowed in our marine protected areas. A marine reserve is a specific type of marine protected area where no take is allowed. So no fishing, no extractive activities. You are picking up and removing something that is not allowed. Another term that you guys might hear float around and people might ask some questions is about a national marine sanctuary. We do not have those in Oregon. That is designated by the federal government, but California does have them. So sometimes people kind of wrap them all together as the same thing. So our marine reserves and our marine protected areas here are all controlled by the state. They're within our state waters out to 3 miles. So this is not anything to do with the federal government at all. And they have really different regulations, just as a bit of information. So we're going to ignore those and focus really on the intertidal part of our marine reserves and protected areas. And in general, the rocky intertidal places, those tide pool areas, are protected. I'll show you guys some maps that you guys can see that not always is this the case, and there's some funky boundaries that make it a little more difficult. But in general, when you're talking to people about, you know, what is and isn't allowed or where can I go to do these things, these rocky intertidal places are protected. I have this note down here just so you guys know these are also places of research. So places like Strawberry Hill has a long-term scientific study that's been going on in the intertidal. And they do have a scientific take permit where they apply to us, ODFW, to make sure that they're following rules and regulations about what they can and can't take. So there are some specific cases where some take is allowed for scientific research, but we really make sure that that research is really benefiting the knowledge, and there's no other way to get that knowledge except to take these critters. So, again, that was a lot of words, really easy symbols, marine reserve, red, no take of fish of any kind. A marine protected area next to it, this is the case, this is Port Orford, this is the Redfish Rocks Marine Reserve, and there you're allowed to take salmon and crab. Also a note, boats are allowed to drive through the reserve, and they actually are allowed to anchor there as well. They're just not allowed to deploy any fishing gear, and I'll let Todd cover how hard that may or may not be to see, and what that may or may not look like. So I'll let him tackle that mess. So overall, we have 5 sites. This is 10 plus years in the making. A lot of you guys in this room have been a part of this long process, longer than I've been a part of this process. And so we're doing a phased-in approach to starting the regulations of the Marine Reserve. This is so we can gather baseline data. So the first 2, Redfish Rocks here in the south and Otter Rock in the middle, started in 2012. Big Cape Perpetua and Cascade Head start this January 2014, and Cape Falcon will start in 2016 as we gather that baseline data. So, jumping in, here we are, Cape Perpetua. So this is a pretty large site spanning from north of Yachats, south of Heceta Head. And we have the Marine Reserve in the middle, nice bright red, no fishing allowed. And I'm going to focus first on what fishing activities are allowed. So these are generally what would occur on a boat. So in the North MPA, you are allowed to catch salmon by troll. It's a form of fishing gear. And crab. This is both recreational and commercial. And you are also allowed to recreationally use a hook and line and fish from shore. The seabird protection area out here in the light blue, there's no take of those species of fish. This is generally the species, a lot of people call them forage fish. These are species that are commonly eaten by seabirds for their food. So that's why, and in the community team process, it was really a focus on the bird habitats out here, and specifically the marble murrelets. So this was a key habitat and a very big focus. We really wanted to make sure that that food source was protected. So the Southeast MPA has very similar restrictions on it, plus it has no take of squid and no trawl gear. That's the ones with the big nets in the back. All right, so focusing on the shoreline is where things start to get a little squirrely, but hopefully these maps, and I have some takeaway maps that might help you guys clear up some of these questions. So basically, going back to, before I get into the nitty-gritty details, if it's rocky tide pool, it's most likely protected. So that's the general rule. I'm going to go into the ridiculous amount of details because I know you guys are all fairly familiar with this place. Most general tourists, I feel like, won't need this level of information. Plus, people who are actually going to harvest, it's the burden of responsibility is on them to really know what the regulations are. So this is really just to help you guys get a better understanding. So this is the zoomed in on the North MPA. So that starts kind of, it's north of Smelt Sands, and I forget what the actual boundary is. I wrote it down on there. But there's no intertidal take. Basically, the whole area, except this little area around the Yachats River mouth. And where that boundary is basically at the Yachats State Park, the little overlook platform right there, to about where the Yachats Inn is, right at the Yachat Ocean River Road, or Ocean Road. So that area is allowed for intertidal harvest. It's a big sand flat, and probably a lot of people can raise their clam there. Is my guess is probably the only thing that people are really going to take. Okay, so moving farther. So this is where it gets even more fun. So now this is the next chunk south. So again, we have the Marine Reserve. We're starting right up here at Cape Perpetua in the North Marine Protected Area, and at Devil's Turn. And right here, out here in front, right here, out front of the Perpetua Visitor Center, is that big sandy beach. That actually is a marine garden that's still left as the Cape Perpetua Marine Garden. This has been a place where people can take razor clams, and there's actually people very passionate about taking razor clams from there. It's one of the few razor clam beaches kind of in this vicinity. So that opportunity is still open to people to razor clam right there. There's a small section. So the rest of the intertidal area is then closed. And then the small section between Gwynn Creek and Cummings Creek, or those two portions of the Neptune Park, that is open where people can collect clams and mussels from the intertidal. This has historically been the Neptune Intertidal Research Reserve is what it's called, if that means anything to anybody. And it's still left open as a part of, it's mainly a sandy-ish area. There's some rocks in there as well where people can collect clams and mussels. So again, the intertidal area is closed off until you get to Bob Creek. And then from south of Bob Creek all the way down the rest of the Marine Reserve, that intertidal area is open. And for hopefully those local folks know, it's pretty much sand at that point in time. And so when I say the intertidal area or the shoreline, I mean to the low water line. So wherever the water is, especially at a super low tide, that's basically the intertidal area. So I feel like all of you guys are fairly educated in that, but just make sure we're all on the same page. Okay. So I want to jump into a lot of questions, but the rules are kind of confusing. Are there any specific rule questions about this intertidal stuff before I hopefully go into some more exciting stuff? Yeah.
So at Strawberry Hill, you cannot take that.
Yes, Strawberry Hill cannot take anything. Check. All right.
What about seaweeds?
Seaweeds, yes, sorry. You cannot take seaweeds at all either. So I was going to mention that at the beginning. So this is interjurisdictional, and no one needs to understand who has what rights over which critters, because the land is by one people, the critters are by other, and seaweeds are not. It's a mess. So really, any kinds of enforcement questions we'll direct to OSP, and he'll kind of ferret out where the rules actually exist and who is in control of that thing. But no animals, no seaweeds, nothing living. That's what we mean by no take. So plants, animals, everything, whole 9 yards. We like to use the phrase, leave no trace, take only pictures. So although you are still allowed to collect agates and non-living shells from these places as souvenirs, it's better just to recommend people to just leave it for others to see and take a picture instead. Okay. Boring rules, one more question. Rules,
One
yes?
more question. Isn't there still a prohibition on mussels due to a toxin all the way to Walport in effect?
It's open now.
It's
Is it
open
open?
now.
Oh,
So whether or not certain shellfish are open is going to be the ag hotline to know whether or not you can harvest it for consumption. And so that is determined by the biotoxin and determined by testing. So that'll be very changing, and usually they block off large sections of the coast for that. Yeah.
So the seabird area is completely separate from the MPA then? They don't overlap? The seabird doesn't come into the coast then?
No, it does
Okay.
not. But the regulations for the southeast marine protected area, this one down here, are very similar. So they're pretty much the same for protecting the forage fish. Okay. So all the boring rules, at least for my part, out of the way. I'll let Todd deal with the rest of them. But what the heck are these things supposed to even be doing? So short and sweet: to conserve and learn. That's what we're doing here. So in the short term, the marine reserves are set up to protect against uncertainty, kind of like an insurance policy, right? We don't know what changes might be happening out there, natural or man-made. Setting aside these areas like other parks areas for protection, it's just a good idea to protect against uncertainty. This is also how we call management agency as a precautionary approach to resource management, right? There's so much we don't know: ocean acidification, global warming, all of these kinds of things, all of these changes that might be coming. It's better to have a precautionary approach. In the long term, we're hoping that this will help conserve habitats and biodiversity. And because we're setting aside these areas and making them undisturbed, right? They're not being fished, they're not being used for other uses. They can serve as reference sites, and we can learn a lot from our research that we're doing. So what the heck are we learning, and what are we studying out there? So our main goal for ODFW is to find out what the effects of taking out fishing is from an area. So from the marine environment, the critters and the ecology that's going on there, as well as the human side, so the people and the communities. So we have two different departments that are doing scientific monitoring. We call them ecological monitoring and human dimensions monitoring. So all this we're hoping is just to increase our knowledge and to better inform resource management as we move forward. So what exactly are we sampling? Well, we're sampling the ocean conditions. That's what's actually going on in the ocean. So that is a picture of a CTD, basically a computer that we bolt to the sea floor, and it's taking continuous measurements of temperature, salinity, oxygen, everything that's going on in the ocean. So we can try and see, are there things going on that are different in this area than some other areas? We're looking at the habitat. Is it a sand flat that might have a crab on it? Is it rocky boulder? Is it, bedrock? This relationship with habitats and ocean conditions can maybe help drive what species are there. So by looking at, the fish, the invertebrates, and the seaweeds, and the combination of all the stuff, we're learning not only what is there, but how it might change over time. So how do we do this? All of these things are kind of our core ecological monitoring. So we're sampling the oceanography, that's that ocean conditions with a various amount of tools. We have what's called a SMRF, which is basically the recruitment of small baby rockfish. It's basically a bag that's suspended in the ocean or anchored to the ground and suspended on a buoy. And it's got a bunch of stuff in there and nice sheltery places for baby rockfish to hide in. And so we're learning about when rockfish are recruiting into some of these areas. We have intertidal surveys, hook and line surveys, our volunteer angling program. We take volunteers out on the boats with us. We're catching and release fishing, and we're getting the fish in hand so we can actually measure the length and weight. This is the only way that we can get accurate length weight measurements of these fish. So we have benthic extraction surveys. We're learning about what's actually attached to those rocks, those tiny little algae and the tiny little invertebrates that are really hard to study. We have scuba divers that we're working with who are taking visual surveys of the fish and the invertebrates. And then we have a suite of what we're calling video surveys. So it's video cameras mounted on various devices. We have a lander that kind of looks like a crab pot. We have a sled that we tow behind the boat. And we have a remotely operated vehicle that can kind of fly around under the water. And all this information is getting us is the habitat, right? The lay of the land, the rocks, and the invertebrates that are there, as well as being able to look at the fish species. And so I'm going to show you some video that we've captured here at Cape Perpetua in a little bit. So I just wanted to touch really briefly on what it is we're studying about the human side of things. And we don't have as many cool, snazzy toys to play with because really when studying humans, we just need to talk to humans and we need to gather some data. So we're asking these kinds of questions such as who are the communities connected? Are there economic impacts to stopping fishing in some of these areas and what might they be? How are things shifting? How are attitudes or perceptions about the marine environment or specifically about marine reserves changing? What are values to things that may not necessarily have a monetary value, like the view at this beautiful facility here? How would you value something like that? And what does that mean for you in your community? And then how do those kinds of things change over time? So this is a long-term project. We have these reserves until the evaluation in 2023. And so how are all, both the ecological and the human side of things changing as we go through time? All right, so that's kind of the end of my spiel. Again, here's our website up top, and here's the OSP dispatch number, which I'm sure Todd will go over. But that was kind of my bit.
But anyway, we're kind of transitioning in enforcement. My name's Todd Thompson, work for the State Police out of Newport Fish and Wildlife. And so we have jurisdiction at Newport from probably Pacific City down to, typically about 10 Mile Creek. We meet up with the forest guys, with the Marine Reserve. We're stretching out a little bit farther with that, with some of our enforcement efforts on the Cape Perpetua Marine Reserve. Oregon is unique with Alaska, where all the fish and wildlife enforcement is done through the state police. So we're just a separate division in the state police. A lot of us started out in patrol and transferred in, and so we can kind of hop back and forth in the division as an agency. So we're kind of like the multi-tool of officers. We investigate crashes, criminal stuff, in addition to fish and wildlife. And so we kind of do it all. Marine Reserve, like Stacey said, has been around for about 10 years. I've been involved in the process for a lot of that. When these are getting implemented, I sat through a lot of meetings. And so here we are, and now we're basically the main agency charged with enforcing these rules. And some of the rules they're unique to each site. That's because separate community teams came up with the recommendations for the rules, and so they're kind of tailored to the specific needs and wants and desires of the locals that are involved in that team. And which always makes it fun for us trying to enforce unique things, but that's okay. We can do it. So really Cape Perpetua is pretty straightforward for the most part. You can see pretty much 100% of the Marine Reserve for us, and it's just remote enough that we're not getting a lot of diverse users on it from the ocean. Right now it's been primarily all commercial. All of our enforcement concerns have been with commercial crab, and that was early in the year. Which is our main goal is education, through enforcement. Anytime you have a new regulation, there's always a big, learning curve on getting people up to speed. And, most people, if they know the regulations, they're going to do the right thing. We have, that element that doesn't care, but you know, that's a pretty small percentage for the most part. So that, you know, that helps us out. The other thing, you know, the beach, thing that helped us out is a lot of these rocky areas are already marine gardens or other kind of otherwise protected, and there's already existing signage in a lot of these areas for that. So that's helped us, and so that's why I really haven't been writing Stacy too bad about the lack of signs. So I make sure I dig her every time I see her, but it hasn't been too bad. It's been manageable. You know, we've been working the reserve quite a bit, and you know, I was telling Stacy so far really, but haven't had any enforcement issues on the beach other than the way it's going right now. You know, some starfish coming off the end of the last little tide, but it's been pretty minimal for the most part. We'll kind of see as the summer season gets going on how that, you know, how that plays out. But that's kind of why I want to be down here talking to you guys, because there's a lot more people in this room than I have troopers, and really the only way we can do our job is with the help of, you know, concerned people giving us a call. That's really actually how we make most all our cases. Very small percentage if we ever really see, you know, I've never seen anyone poach an elk in front of me. But I made a lot of elk poaching cases. But it's all from people, you know, calling in and giving us information. That's kind of the way I'm hoping this will work, you know, down here with that. So that's kind of what we're hoping is, you know, getting calls. So just one thing else as far as the enforcement tools we have. Of course, I have troopers with eyes and binoculars for shore stuff. We do have a 52-foot patrol vessel that's currently stationed out of Astoria that we've actually been in the Marine Reserve kind of 3 or 4 times. Unless we pulled the plots with that, and we kind of patrol that up and down up the coast. And we're actually getting ready to make a pass through again next week to pick up some stray crab pots that are made in the reserve. So, excuse me, we've been there. We also have a 25-foot rigid pole inflatable that we can you know, run down there for spots and all that. So,
Are they?
Yes.
So how do we? So there's vessels in there. Is there a way to obviously know that it's an OSP vessel?
We're pretty distinctive on our boat, but probably the biggest question, you guys see a boat in there, you know, what's it doing? Is it a research boat? Is it a commercial boat? Are they fishing? Are they just traveling through? You know, it can be, you know, pretty confusing. The research boats, we have some dedicated research boat through OSU, but they are doing a lot of contracting with existing commercial boats. And so we're going to have, you know, charter boats and commercial boats in there, you know, under permits doing research with ODFW staff on board. And I think, Stacy, they're flying research banners or flags, or they should be.
We have a little research flag, but I don't know that you're really going to be able to see it from shore unless you really have binoculars on. But it does have the ODFW logo, and it does say research. But
yeah, one thing
color
that.
is it?
Go ahead.
What color is it?
the flag itself is white. The logo is the green and brown logo. Looks and I think the lettering is research in white, I believe.
Yeah, and if you look at these boats for a little bit, you can figure out what they're doing. I don't know if you guys want to, you know, what a crab boat looks like. You know, they all come in shapes and sizes, but they all have that big round, you know, crab block, you know, up just behind the house. And you know, they go up and down quite a bit. You know, close. There's actually one motoring up when I came down here tonight, and you know, stop. You know, 2 minutes with binoculars, I can tell no one's on the back deck. You know, it's pushing white water with the bow with me, just making pretty good headway, and it's just, you know, traveling through. You know, if you see a crab boat, if it's stopping, you got 2 to 3 guys on the back deck, you know, working gear, it's moving if it's stopping. It's kind of spinning around in circles, and it's just taking a lot of time in there. Yeah, they're probably doing something they shouldn't be doing. But if it's, you know, making a beeline and heading in a direction, it's more likely to just passing through. Haven't seen any salmon trawlers in there yet. I think most of them are offshore around Hissita Banks, but that would probably be the other type of boats that we'll most likely see in there. And they're a little harder to tell if they're fishing or not, because a lot of times they'll run stabilizers out anyway. And you know, if you have binoculars and you're close enough, if a salmon troll boat is fishing, more than likely it's going to have float bags out the back of the boat, and they're basically styrofoam planers about yay big, and you can usually see them planing probably about 40 to 50 yards behind the boat. And so if they have their, you know, the bags out, then they definitely have gear deployed. And if the sun's right, you can actually see the cables kind of, you know, stretching out behind the boat. So that's kind of some of the ways we tell if a boat's actually engaged or not in fishing. But bottom line, if something looks fishy, you know, give us a call.